The human ship moved. That was the first thing Vexarin noticed that didn't fit. It moved not faster, it moved wrong. One moment it hung at the system's outer marker, a dull gray speck against the distant sun. The next it was in two places at once. He blinked. The display did not correct itself. Report, High Admiral Drakon Ver said from the command dais. His voice carried across the obsidian bridge like a hammer falling. What is the target doing? Vexarin's claws tapped against his console. The cold light of the bridge's main display caught the scales on his hands, reflected green, then gold, then nothing. He read the sensor data twice. I cannot say, High Admiral. You cannot say. Ver's bronze skin flickered with irritation. Or you cannot understand. Vexarin's left eye, the one with the old scar, twitched. The ship's emission signature has changed. It appears to be occupying two positions along the same spatial vector. That is not a behavior I have observed in any vessel. Impossible. Yes, High Admiral. Vexarin kept his voice level. He had commanded 12 campaigns. He had taken 4 worlds. He knew the difference between a sensor glitch and a ship that was doing something the sensors had no category for. It is impossible, and it is happening. Behind him, the bridge crew went quiet. 16 stations, each crewed by Vrethkar soldiers in ceremonial bronze armor. They had come here expecting a display, a show of force against a primitive race that had been quiet for 300 years. Instead, they were watching a gray speck violate the laws they had built empires on. Ver rose from his throne, 7 feet of bronze-skinned certainty. 3 scars ran across his jaw, the ghost of a duel 2 centuries ago. He walked to the forward display and stood there, arms crossed, staring at the impossible object on the screen. That ship is 1,200 years old, he said. Our intelligence calls it a museum piece. A relic. A ship that was already obsolete when its builders were still fighting with gunpowder. We have no intelligence on it, Vexarin said. We have intelligence on ships that were built in the same era. This one has been missing for 300 years. Missing, perhaps. Vexarin tapped his claws once. Perhaps it was waiting. The words hung in the air. The display counted down from 12 seconds. Vexarin had been on the Obsidian Bridge for 3 days now, ever since the expeditionary force had jumped into the Sol outer marker. The Vrethkar Empire had taken 43 star systems in his lifetime. 7 of them had been conquered in the last year alone. The Empire's doctrine was simple. Newer is better. Faster ships. Stronger weapons. Encryption standards that changed every 6 months, so no one could crack them. The humans had been quiet for 300 years. So when the expedition arrived at the Sol outer marker and found only one ship guarding the system, Vexarin had laughed. The sound had echoed across the bridge, and the other officers had joined him. A museum piece. A relic. A ship that had been built before the Vrethkar Empire had even existed. His laugh felt heavy now. Sour in his throat. The target has issued a response, the communications officer said. Play it, Ver ordered. The bridge's speakers crackled. A voice came through, human, calm, unhurried. It sounded like someone reading a weather report. This system is protected. I suggest you depart. Vexarin counted the seconds. 12. The ultimatum had been issued 12 seconds ago. The human had not hesitated. Had not asked for clarification. Had not expressed fear. She had simply answered. The speakers clicked off. The bridge was silent. Is that all? Ver asked. Yes, High Admiral. That is all. Ver turned to face the bridge. His left hand waved a dismissal of the entire human species. They send a relic and a suggestion. They expect us to be intimidated by a 1,200-year-old ship and a woman who sounds like she is ordering tea. 1,300, Vexarin said. What? The ship's life support system is 1,300 years old. High Admiral. Our initial scans were off by a century. The age estimate has been corrected. Ver stared at him. Does that matter? I do not know. Vexarin's claws tapped again. It seems like a detail we should not ignore, Ver ordered mockery. The fleet responded. Across the Obsidian Bridge, the crew began a ritual they had performed 43 times before. Charts of conquered systems scrolled across secondary displays. Images of burning planets, the flags of species that no longer existed. This is what happens, Ver said. His voice carrying to every station, to those who stand against the Vrethkar. This is what the Empire does. We conquer. We expand. We improve. Vexarin watched the display. The human ship had not moved from its 2 positions. It hung there, gray and silent, like a stone dropped into a still pond. High Admiral, Vexerin said. The ship is not responding. Responding to what? The mockery. Vexerin gestured to the displays. We are broadcasting our victories. It is not reacting, because it has no weapons. No defenses. No crew worth mentioning. Ver's jaw set. It is a museum piece, Commander. A relic. You're treating it like an unknown threat. I am treating it like a thing I do not understand. Then you're failing at your duty. Ver turned back to the display. You have taken 4 worlds. You have fought in 12 campaigns. You have seen our enemies burn. And you are worried about a ship that is old enough to have witnessed the fall of dynasties that we have never heard of. Vexerin's claws stopped tapping. His left eye, the one with the scar from the training accident 87 years ago, felt warm, the old wound. The one that had healed but never forgotten. The ship is 1,300 years old, he said quietly. We have existed for 12,000 years. That means this ship was built when the Empire was barely 1,000 years old. It was built before we had encryption standards, before we had this fleet, before we had high admirals who had never been wrong. Are you questioning my judgment, Commander? Vexerin looked at the display, at the gray speck that was occupying 2 positions at once, at the human ship that had answered an ultimatum in 12 seconds with a suggestion. I am questioning whether we should fire a warning shot, he said, to see what it does. Ver considered this. The bridge waited. Fire a low-yield plasma bolt, Ver ordered. 0.8 light speed, 1 shot. Let them know what we are capable of. The weapons officer acknowledged. The display changed. A targeting reticle appeared over the gray speck. Target locked, the officer said, firing in 5 seconds. Vexerin watched the countdown. The plasma bolt left the main battery at 0.08 light speed. It should have reached the human ship in 2.3 seconds. Vexerin counted. The bolt traveled across the void, a streak of blue-white energy that would have punched through any unshielded hull. It was a message. A statement. We have weapons, and we will use them. The human ship didn't dodge. It didn't shield. It moved. The sensors screamed. Vexerin's console lit up with errors, overlapping readings, contradictory vectors, spatial anomalies that had no name in the Imperial database. The ship was emitting a subspace signature that didn't match any known frequency. It was interrogating the fleet, learning from them. Report, Ver shouted. Vexerin read the data. His claws were tapping again. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. The old pattern, the one that appeared when something was wrong. The plasma bolt passed through its position without impact, Vexerin said. The ship moved approximately 0.002 milliseconds before impact. It did not move away. It moved sideways, through itself. Vexerin looked up from the console. It appeared to be in 2 places at once, High Admiral. The bolt passed through 1 position. The other position remained intact. I do not know how it did this. Find out. I cannot. Vexerin's hands were steady, but his voice was not. The sensors cannot process what they are reading. The ship is not following any known laws of physics. It appears to be asking a question. A question. The sensor algorithms are receiving data that does not fit any existing category. The systems are trying to categorize it. They cannot. The ship is emitting a signal that says, I am here, and I'm also here, and I'm not telling you which one is real. Ver took a step back from the display. Vexerin had never seen his High Admiral step back from anything. 306 years of public certainty. 200 years of never being wrong. 7 systems conquered in 43 years. The Vrethkar Empire had built its doctrine around Drakon Ver's confidence. Newer is better. Speed wins. Patience is weakness. The human ship was still hanging in 2 positions, gray and silent. Waiting. All batteries. Ver ordered, fire on my command. High Admiral, Vexerin said. I recommend we do not do that. You recommend I stand down? In front of a museum piece, I recommend we understand what we are facing before we commit to a course of action we cannot undo. Vexerin stepped forward. The ship has not attacked us. It has only defended itself. That is a pattern. A pattern that suggests patience. It suggests weakness. It suggests the ability to wait. Vexerin's eye was burning now. The old wound, the one that reminded him of the time he had been wrong. We have conquered 43 systems by moving fast, by overwhelming our enemies before they could react. This ship is not moving fast. It is not overwhelming us. It is outthinking us. Ver's left hand waved. The dismissal, the gesture that had ended 1,000 debates. Open a channel to the human ship, he ordered. I will speak to the captain. The communications officer complied. The speakers crackled again. The human voice came through, calm, unhurried, the same voice that had answered the ultimatum. This is Captain Ilara Orlov of the UES Pilgrim. I am High Admiral Drakon Ver of the Vrethkar Empire. You have violated Imperial space. You have evaded our warning shot. You are broadcasting a signal that is interfering with our systems. I demand that you stand down. There was a pause. Vexerin heard something in the background, a soft sound, metal on metal. The click of a thermos being set down. I have not violated your space, Orlov said. This system has been protected for 14 centuries. I'm not broadcasting a signal, I'm simply existing here. You are occupying two positions simultaneously. Yes, that is one of the things I can do. Ver's bronze skin darkened. You are threatening the Vrethkar Empire. I am not threatening anyone. I told you to depart. You chose to fire on me. Another pause. The sound of the thermos again. I'm going to do something now. I do not want to do it, but I'm going to. Stand down, Captain. I cannot. On the human ship, the thermos was still cold. Ilara Orlov had made tea 2 hours ago. She had not drunk it. She had set the dented steel thermos on the console and left it there while she watched the Vrethkar fleet arrive. 1,200 ships, 43 conquered systems. All the certainty of an empire that had never learned to wait. She had been waiting for 1,400 years. Well, not her. The ship, the UES Pilgrim, had been waiting. Built in a different era, by a species that had not yet learned to conquer, the ship had been designed for a purpose that the Vrethkar could not understand. The Pilgrim was not a weapon. It was a guardian, a witness. A patient thing that had been waiting for the galaxy to need it. Orlov was the 7th captain of the Pilgrim. The first 6 had died of old age in the ship's quarters, still waiting. She had been captain for 37 years, and she had spent most of that time watching the sensors for something that never came. Until today, she looked at the thermos, the dent on the side from a zero-gravity drop 7 years ago. The cold tea inside, she always forgot to finish it. The dent was permanent. The cold was incidental. But the ship had not forgotten. Engineering, Orlov said, "What is our status?" Webb's voice came through the internal comm. All systems nominal. The ship's computational matrix is fully online. She's been waiting for this, Captain. She's happy. Happy. It's the only word I know that fits. Orlov nodded. She had known the Pilgrim for 37 years. She had learned its quirks, its habits, the way it hummed when it was thinking. The ship was not a machine. It was a partner, a friend, a thing that had been built to mature over centuries, not be replaced. Send this message to the Obsidian Bridge, she said. Audio only. The comm officer nodded. The message went out. I told you to depart, Orlov said. That was the only warning you were going to get. I am not a weapon. I'm not a threat. I am a person who has been waiting for a long time, and I do not want to hurt anyone. But I can, and I will, if you do not turn around and go home. She set the thermos down again. The tea sloshed inside, still cold. Vexerin heard the transmission. The human voice, calm, unhurried, the voice of someone who had made a decision and was not going to argue about it. She was not shouting. She was not threatening. She was explaining. High Admiral, Vexerin said, she is not lying. How do you know? Because she has not needed to lie. Vexerin stepped closer to the display. Look at the ship. It is still in 2 positions. It is still not attacking. It is waiting for us to make a decision that we cannot undo. We can destroy it. Can we? Vexerin gestured at the display. We just fired a plasma bolt at it. The bolt passed through its position without causing damage. We do not know how to hurt it. We do not know what it is, and we are about to fire on it again. Ver's left hand raised. The dismissal, but it did not wave. It hung there, frozen, a hand that had dismissed 1,000 arguments, now stopped in mid-air by a gray speck and a woman who had not finished her tea. The Empire does not retreat, Ver said. Then the Empire will lose, Commander Vasquez. Ver's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. You have served me for 12 campaigns. You have taken 4 worlds. You have never questioned my judgment. I am questioning it now. Why? Vexerin looked at the display, at the human ship that had been waiting for 14 centuries, at the cold tea on the console, at the 2 positions that could not both be real. Because I have been wrong before, he said. 87 years ago. A training accident. I thought I was invincible. I took a risk I should not have taken. I still have the scar. He touched his left eye. I was certain and I was wrong. I have never forgotten what that felt like. Ver stared at him. Your certainty is not wisdom, Vexerin said. It is just certainty. And if you are wrong now, you will not have a scar. You will have an empire with nothing to show for it but the memory of a ship that was too old to be a threat. The bridge was silent. Ver's left hand dropped to his side. Fire the main battery, he said. Full yield. All ships. Vexerin closed his eyes. On the display, the human ship began to move. Across the obsidian bridge, every display flickered. The main battery's full-yield bolts launched a dozen streaks of white-hot plasma, enough to vaporize a small moon. They crossed the void in a shimmering line. They passed through the human ship as if it weren't there. Vexerin opened his eyes. The ship was still in two places. The bolts passed through one position, then the other, then both, and kept going into empty space, until they dissipated into nothing. Target unharmed, the weapons officer said. No damage registered. Fire again, Ver ordered. His voice had lost its certainty. It had become something Vexerin had never heard before, a question. The main battery cycled. Another volley. Another miss. It's not evading, Vexerin said. It's not even acknowledging the fire. Look at the sensor data. He pulled up a secondary display. The human ship's signature was changing, not moving, but shifting. The subspace frequency it was emitting was no longer just a curiosity. It was spreading. From the ship to the system's relay buoys. From the buoys to the fleet's communication satellites. From the satellites to every ship in the expedition. Hi, Admiral. Vexerin said, his claws tapping rapidly. The ship is transmitting something across our network. What kind of transmission? I don't know yet. It's not a weapon. It's not a virus. It's a handshake. A handshake. It's introducing itself to our systems. Asking them to respond. Vexerin read the data faster. His scarred eye burning. Our encryption standards were written 1,300 years ago. The Empire never changed them. They assumed no one would ever be able to exploit the Foundation. Ver stared at him. Are you telling me the Empire's encryption is compromised? I'm telling you the Empire's encryption is a door that was built 1,000 years before the lock was invented. Vexerin's claws stopped tapping, and someone just walked through it. On the main display, the ship began to change. It had been gray, the color of old steel, of a hull that had spent 14 centuries in the void. Now it was glowing, a soft blue light pulsing like a heartbeat, radiating from its center. The ship was not a weapon. It was a question that had been waiting 1,400 years for an answer. Vexerin watched the light spread across the ship's hull. He heard a sound, low, deep, like a bell that had been struck a long time ago and was still ringing. Engineering, he called out. Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array. I need to know what that light is. On the other end of the comm, a Vrethkar technician responded. Commander, the sensors are not responding. They're receiving data, but they're not processing it. The ship is feeding them something they can't categorize. Can't categorize or can't handle. Both. The arrays are overheating. We're losing resolution on the target. Vexerin turned to Ver. Hi, Admiral. We need to cut all data links to the ship. Disconnect from the relay network. Shut down the communication satellites. And do what? Sit here in the dark. We are already in the dark. Vexerin pointed at the display. That ship is learning about us faster than we are learning about it. Every second we stay connected, it gets more information, and we get less. Ver's bronze skin had lost its luster. The scars on his jaw seemed deeper in the dim light of the bridge. Disconnect, he ordered. All ships. Cut external comms. Go to local network only. The order went out. Across the fleet, relays clicked off. Satellite links dropped. The ships became isolated, floating islands in a dark sea. On the main display, the blue light grew brighter. It didn't matter, Vexerin said quietly. What? The transmission had already propagated. We disconnected from the source, but the source had already made copies of itself. It's not a broadcast. It's a seed. It's planted itself in our network, and we can't kill it without killing every ship in the fleet. Ver's left hand rose, the dismissal gesture, but it hung in the air, trembling. How do you know this? He asked. Because the ship is still glowing. Vexerin tapped his console. And because I just realized something. The ship's life support system is 1,300 years old. That means the ship was built to last, to grow, to become more capable over time. It's not a relic. It's a living thing, a guardian. Vexerin looked at the display. We just poked it with a stick, and now it's showing us what it really is. The ship's hull began to shift, not like metal bending, like water changing shape. The gray steel rippled, and the blue light pulsed, and the two positions merged into one. The ship was no longer in two places. It was in one place, but it was not the same place it had been. It was closer. Vexerin checked the distance. The ship had moved, but not in a straight line. It had folded space, brought itself closer without traveling the intervening distance. That's not possible, the navigation officer said. That's not any kind of propulsion we've ever seen. It's not propulsion, Vexerin said. It's geometry. The ship is bending the fabric of space around itself. It's not moving faster. It's making the distance shorter. Ver took a step toward the display. Can we copy that? I don't think so. It would require a computational matrix that has been maturing for 14 centuries. We don't have that. We build new ships every decade. We replace them before they have a chance to get old. The ship was now close enough to see details. Vexerin zoomed in. The hull was covered in markings, not symbols, not language, but something else. Patterns, mathematical formulas, equations that describe the shape of the universe. On the ship's bridge, visible through a transparent section of the hull, a human figure sat at a console. She was not in armor. She was not armed. She was holding a dented steel thermos, and she was not drinking from it. She was watching them. That's Captain Orlov, Vexerin said. How do you know? She's the only one on the bridge. The rest of the crew is probably elsewhere. He paused. She's not afraid. Look at her hands. They're not shaking. She's holding the thermos like it's a routine part of her day. Maybe she doesn't understand what's happening. She understands everything. Vexerin's voice was quiet. She's been waiting for this moment for longer than any of us have been alive, and she's not doing anything. She's just watching. The blue light on the ship's hull intensified, and then the bridge's speakers crackled to life. Captain Orlov's voice came through, calm, unhurried, the same voice that had answered the ultimatum hours ago. Hi, Admiral Ver, Commander Vasquez. I want you to know that I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I have to. To do what? Ver demanded. To show you what your empire has been missing. The bridge went silent. Vexerin watched the display. The ship was no longer just glowing, it was transmitting. A wave of data moving through the fleet's network like water through a sieve. It found every encrypted channel, every classified system, every piece of information the Empire had ever stored, and it opened them all. In 9 seconds, the entire network was laid bare. Vexerin's console lit up with data, not from the ship, but from the Empire's own archives. Strategic plans, fleet movements, encryption keys, diplomatic correspondence, personnel files, everything. The ship had not hacked the Empire. It had simply asked the Empire to show itself, and the Empire had no way to refuse. Shut it down, Ver shouted. Cut all power to the network. We can't, the operations officer said. The network is no longer ours. The ship has taken control of every relay, every satellite, every ship's core systems. We're not even connected to each other anymore. We're just receiving. Vexerin read the data scrolling across his screen. It was not a weapon, it was a mirror. The ship was showing the Empire what it looked like from the outside. All the certainty, all the conquest, all the lives taken and systems burned, and in the middle of it all, one question. Why? Captain Orlov, Vexerin said, his voice steady. Why are you doing this? The speakers paused. Then Orlov's voice came through again. Because someone had to. You've been conquering for 12,000 years. You've never stopped to ask if there was another way. I've been waiting 1,400 years to show you. The Pilgrim was built to protect, not to destroy. But protection sometimes requires demonstration. Demonstration. Yes, another pause. The sound of metal on metal, the thermos being set down. You have a choice now. You can keep fighting. You can try to rebuild your network. You can pretend this didn't happen. Or you can listen to what I'm about to tell you. What are you going to tell me? That the Empire's encryption standards were written 1,300 years ago. They never changed them. They never thought anyone would exploit the Foundation. Her voice was soft now. But I did. And I didn't come here to destroy you. I came here to show you how fragile your certainty really is. The blue light on the ship's hull dimmed. The transmission stopped. The network was still open, but the data had stopped flowing. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Ver collapsed into his command throne. He had not sat down in 40 years. He had stood through every battle, every campaign, every victory. Now he was sitting, and his hands were trembling. "What do we do?" he asked. Vexarin looked at the display. The human ship was still there, still glowing faintly, still waiting. Captain Orlov was still holding her thermos, still not drinking from it. "We do nothing," Vexarin said. "She's not going to attack. She's already done what she came to do. She's shown us that we are not invincible, that our doctrine is built on a foundation of sand." Sand. Our encryption was written in the first 1,000 years of the Empire. We never updated it because we never thought anyone would care enough to break it. We assume that newer is better, that old things are weak. Vexarin's claws stopped tapping. The humans assumed the opposite. They built a ship that would grow more capable as the galaxy grew more complex. They didn't build a weapon. They built a teacher. A teacher, yes. Vexarin turned to face the High Admiral. "And I think we just failed the test." On the display, the human ship began to move again. Not toward the fleet, not away from it. It moved sideways, into the void, and then it was gone. Not faster than light, not folding space. It simply was not there anymore. The fleet was alone, and the network was still open. Every ship's core systems were still accessible. The Empire's secrets were still displayed on every console, waiting to be read. Ver stared at the empty space where the ship had been. "Commander Vasquez," he said, his voice hollow, "what do we do now?" Vexarin looked at the data on his screen. The ship's message was still there, embedded in the network like a seed. A question that the Empire had never asked itself. "Why? We go back," Vexarin said. "We report to the High Council. We tell them what happened. We tell them the truth, that a single human ship, 1,400 years old, with a crew that didn't raise their voices, dismantled the most powerful fleet in the galaxy without firing a single shot." He paused. "And then we ask ourselves why we never thought to build something like that." Ver's left hand dropped to his side. The dismissal gesture had become a weight he could no longer lift. "Prepare to jump," he said. "All ships, return to the home system." The bridge crew moved in silence. Vexarin watched them. They were not defeated. They were not humiliated. They were stunned. The Empire had never been wrong before. Now it was wrong, and no one knew how to process that. Vexarin touched his left eye, the old scar, and remembered what it felt like to be certain, and then find out you were not. He would remember this moment for the rest of his life. 3 days later, Vexarin stood before the High Council. The chamber was vast, a dome of polished obsidian lit by the cold light of a dying star. 12 counselors sat in a semicircle above him, their bronze skin gleaming, their eyes fixed on his face. He had prepared a speech. He had rehearsed it a dozen times. Now, standing in the silence, he realized that no amount of preparation could capture what he had seen. Commander Vasquez, the first counselor, said, "You have requested an audience. You have requested that we suspend all military operations in the outer marker. You have requested that we reconsider our doctrine." "Explain." Vexarin took a breath. 12,000 years of certainty, he said. 9 seconds to undo it. He paused. The counselors waited. The ship was not old, he said. It was patient. It was built to wait. It was built to outlast us. And it did. He told them everything. The movement, the sensor failure, the encryption collapse, the blue light, the voice that never raised itself above a calm suggestion. He told them about the thermos, the dented steel, the cold tea that was never finished. He told them about the question the ship had asked. Why? When he finished, the chamber was silent. The counselors exchanged glances. The first counselor leaned forward. "What do you recommend we do?" Vexarin looked at the counselor. He thought of Captain Orlov holding her thermos, watching the fleet with eyes that had seen 14 centuries of waiting. "We do nothing," he said. "They gave us a gift. They showed us they could have destroyed us. Instead, they showed us they've been protecting us. That ship wasn't built for war. It was built for peace. And we have been so busy conquering that we forgot what peace looks like." The counselor's face hardened. "You expect us to disarm. I expect us to listen." Vexarin's voice was steady. "The Empire has been wrong. Not about our strength, about our purpose. We've been building walls when we should have been building bridges. And what would you have us build now?" Vexarin paused. He thought of the cold tea on the console, the dented thermos, the patience that had outlasted empires. "I don't know," he said. "But I think we should start by asking the question that ship asked us." He looked at the counselors. Why? The chamber waited for his answer, but the answer was not his to give. It belonged to a woman with a dented thermos and a ship that had been waiting 1,400 years to be heard. The Council's decision came at dawn. We suspend operations in the outer marker. We recall the fleets. We reconsider our doctrine. The first Councilor's voice echoed through the obsidian dome. Vexarin listened. He heard the words, but he also heard what they did not say. We will not disarm, we will not abandon our conquests. We will wait, but we will not change. Vexaran stepped forward. Counselor, you have missed the point. The pilgrim was not a warning. It was an invitation. The humans showed us we could be wrong. Now they ask us to choose differently, and if we don't, then they will wait. Vexarin's voice was quiet. They have waited 14 centuries. They can wait another 14. And when the threats come, the things they were built to protect us from, we will be alone. The first counselor stared at him. We have made our decision, Commander. Vexarin nodded. He turned and walked out. 3 weeks later, he sat in his quarters, staring at the viewport. The home system's sun burned bright and steady. Everything was exactly as it had been before the pilgrim, but nothing was the same. He touched his left eye, the old scar. He had been wrong once before. He had learned that certainty was not wisdom. The Empire had not learned that lesson. They had retreated into the same assumptions, the same pride, the same refusal to ask why. The question haunted him. Why had the pilgrim waited so long? Why had it not destroyed them? Why had Captain Orlov spoken with such calm, such patience? He had no answers, only the weight of what he had seen. Across the void, the UES Pilgrim drifted. Captain Orlov sat at the console, her dented steel thermos beside her. The tea inside had been cold for 6 hours. She didn't mind. Captain, Webb said over the comm, the ship is thinking. About what? About what happens next? It's been waiting 14 centuries. It wants to know if the Empire will learn. Orlov looked at the thermos. The dent on the side was permanent. The cold tea was incidental, but the patience was everything. They won't, she said. Not yet, but they might, and that's enough. Enough for what? Enough to keep waiting. She picked up the thermos and held it. The dent fit perfectly in her palm. Webb, send a message to Commander Vasquez, audio only. To the High Council? No. To him. Tell him the pilgrim is still watching. Tell him the invitation is still open. Tell him we will wait. And what else? Orlov set down the thermos. She looked at the viewport, the endless dark, the distant stars, the silent void. Somewhere out there, threats she had been built to watch for were gathering. The Empire had no idea. Tell him the tea is still cold. That was the point. The message arrived while Vexarin was preparing to sleep. He heard the voice, calm, unhurried, familiar. Captain Orlov, speaking to him alone. Commander Vasquez, I know the Council rejected your plea. I know they chose certainty over wisdom. That is their right, but I want you to know that the pilgrim is still here. We are still watching, and we are still waiting. A pause. The sound of metal on metal. The thermos. There are things in this galaxy that your Empire does not understand. Threats that make your fleet look like children. The pilgrim was built to protect you from those things. Not because we love you, because it is the right thing to do. Another pause. You ask why. I will tell you. Because someone had to. Your Empire has been conquering for 12,000 years. You have forgotten what it means to protect. The pilgrim has not, and neither have I. The message ended. Vexarin sat in the dark. He replayed the words in his mind. Protect, watch, wait. He had thought the pilgrim was a weapon. He had been wrong. It was a guardian, a shield, a thing that had been built not to destroy, but to prevent destruction, and the Empire, the mighty certain, never wrong Empire, had just chosen to ignore it. He touched his left eye. The scar was a reminder that he had been wrong, and that he had survived. The Empire had not survived. It had just delayed its own death. Orlov was still waiting. The pilgrim was still watching, and somewhere in the void, the threats she had spoken of were moving. Vexarin stood up. He walked to the viewport. The sun was still there, warm and bright. He thought of the dented thermos, the cold tea, the patience that had outlasted empires. He understood now. The cold wasn't neglect. It was a choice. A choice to wait, to endure, to protect without demanding recognition. The Empire had not made that choice. But he could. He was only one man, but he had seen the truth. He had been given a gift. He would wait. He would watch. And when the time came, he would be ready. 2 years passed. Vexarin waited. He watched. He listened. The Empire continued its conquests, its certainty intact. The High Council had filed his testimony and forgotten it. The fleet had been rebuilt. The encryption standards had been updated, but only the surface layers. The foundation remained unchanged. He knew this because he checked. Every week, he ran a diagnostic on the Empire's network. Every week, he found the same vulnerability. The Pilgrim seed was still there, dormant, waiting. The ship had not taken the Empire's secrets. It had simply shown them where the door was, and the Empire had not locked it. On the 104th week, the alarms went off. Vexerin was in his quarters when the klaxons sounded. He ran to the viewport. The home system's sun was still there. The planets were still there. But something else was there too. Something that had not been there a moment ago. A ship. Not human. Not Vrethkar. Something else. It was massive. Larger than the Obsidian Bridge. Larger than any ship in the fleet. Its hull was black, featureless, absorbing light like a wound in space. It did not move. It simply hung there, waiting. Vexerin's claws began to tap. The intruder is broadcasting a message, the communications officer said over the emergency channel. All frequencies, all languages, it says. You have been classified. Prepare for assimilation. Vexerin felt the blood drain from his face. He had seen this before. Not this exact ship, but the pattern. The Pilgrim had been built to watch for threats like this. The Empire had been warned. The Pilgrim had shown them the vulnerability, the fragility, the consequences of certainty, and the Empire had done nothing. Get me the High Council, Vexerin said. Now, the Council convened in the Obsidian Dome. The first Councilor's face was pale. Commander Vasquez, you have requested an emergency session. What do you know about this intruder? Vexerin stepped forward. His claws were still tapping. I know what it is, he said. I know what it wants. And I know how to stop it. How? By doing what the Pilgrim asked us to do, by questioning our assumptions, by admitting that we were wrong. The first Councilor's jaw tightened. We do not have time for philosophy, Commander. The intruder is threatening to assimilate our entire species. We need military solutions. You have military solutions. They will not work. Why not? Vexerin looked at the Councilors, at the certainty that had been 12,000 years in the making, at the fear that was finally cracking through. Because the intruder is 1,400 years old, he said. It was built by a species that predates the Empire. The Pilgrim was built to watch for it. The Pilgrim was built to protect us from it, and we fired on the Pilgrim. We refused to listen. We chose certainty over wisdom. The second Councilor rose. You are blaming us for this. I am blaming us for not preparing. The Pilgrim showed us our vulnerability. It showed us that we had stopped asking questions. It showed us that we had become arrogant, and we did nothing. The first Councilor raised his hand. Commander, do you have a solution or not? Vexerin paused. He thought of Orlov holding her thermos, watching the fleet with eyes that had seen 14 centuries of waiting. He thought of the dented steel, the cold tea, the patience that had outlasted empires. I have a solution, he said, but it requires us to admit that we were wrong and to ask for help. The Councilors stared at him. The message went out on all frequencies. Captain Orlov of the UES Pilgrim, this is Commander Jorik Vasquez of the Vrethkar Empire. We were wrong. We should have listened. We should have changed, and now we need your help. The void was silent. The black ship hung in the distance, waiting, watching. Vexerin's claws kept tapping, then a response. Commander Vasquez, this is Captain Ilara Orlov. I heard you. I heard all of you. A pause. I have been waiting 1,400 years to hear those words. They were worth the wait. The thermos clicked, the dented steel. The cold tea, the Pilgrim is coming. Tell your fleet to stand down. Tell your council to watch, and tell them this, it wasn't old, it was patient. The Pilgrim arrived 9 seconds later. It did not move faster than light, it folded space. One moment, it was in the outer marker, 14 light years away. The next moment it was here, hanging between the Empire's fleet and the black ship. It was not the same vessel Vexerin had seen 2 years ago. It had grown. Its hull was larger, its blue light brighter, its presence more commanding. The ship had been waiting, maturing, becoming what it was meant to be, and now it was ready. The black ship fired first, a beam of dark energy cutting through space toward the Pilgrim. It struck the hull and stopped. The blue light absorbed it, transformed it, scattered it into nothing. Then the Pilgrim answered, not with weapons, with light. A wave of blue energy pulsing like a heartbeat spreading across the void. It touched the black ship's hull. It touched the Empire's fleet. It touched every sensor, every relay, every network, and it asked a question. Why? The black ship did not answer. It did not fire again. It simply stopped. The blue light enveloped it. The dark energy faded. The threat was neutralized. Not destroyed. Not assimilated. Shown the door. The Pilgrim had done what it was built to do. It had protected without destroying. It had taught without punishing. It had waited for the right moment, and the right moment had come. On the Pilgrim's bridge, Captain Orlov set down her thermos. The dent was still there. The cold tea was still inside, but the tea was no longer cold because she had forgotten to drink it. It was cold because she had been waiting, and the waiting was over. The intruder has been neutralized, Webb said. The Pilgrim is receiving a transmission from the Empire's High Council. What do they say? They say thank you. Orlov nodded. She picked up the thermos and held it. The dent fit perfectly in her palm. Send a response, she said. Tell them the Pilgrim will continue to watch. Tell them the invitation is still open. Tell them that if they ever need us again, they know how to find us. And if they don't, then we wait. She looked at the viewport, the endless dark, the distant stars, the silent void. We have waited 14 centuries. We can wait another 14. She set down the thermos. The tea was still cold. On the obsidian bridge, Vexarin watched the Pilgrim fade into the void. It was gone. The black ship was gone. The fleet was intact, the Empire was safe, and the High Council was silent. But Vexarin was not silent. He stepped forward. The bridge crew turned to look at him. They had heard his testimony. They had seen his resolve. They had watched him stand up to the High Council and refuse to back down. Commander Vasquez, the first councillor, said over the comm, "What would you have us do now?" Vexarin touched his left eye. The old scar, the reminder that he had been wrong, that he had learned, that he had survived. First, he said, we rewrite our doctrine, slower ships, longer missions, systems that mature over centuries, not years. We build ships that can wait. And then? We listen. He looked at the viewport, at the empty space where the Pilgrim had been. We listen to the ones who have been waiting longer than we have. We ask them what they know. We learn from them. The first counselor's voice was quiet. And if they don't answer, then we keep listening. Vexarin's claws stopped tapping. We have been conquering for 12,000 years. We have never stopped to ask if there was another way. The Pilgrim showed us there is. Now we have to choose. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Vexarin turned away from the viewport. He walked to the exit, his footsteps echoing on the obsidian floor. He had done what he could. He had told the truth. He had asked for help. He had been patient. Now it was the Empire's turn. 3 months later, Vexarin received a package. It was small, wrapped in human fabric. He opened it carefully, expecting a letter, a message, a hologram. Inside was a dented steel thermos. He recognized it immediately. The dent on the side, the scratch on the lid, the faint smell of cold tea. It was Orlov's thermos, the one she had been holding when she dismantled an empire. There was no note, no explanation. Just the thermos, dented and worn, passed from one hand to another. Vexarin held it. The dent fit perfectly in his palm. He opened the lid. Inside was cold tea, cold, untouched, waiting. He did not drink it. He closed the lid and set the thermos on his desk. He understood now. The cold wasn't neglect. It was patience. It was a choice to wait, to endure, to trust that the right moment would come. The thermos had been waiting 14 centuries for someone to understand that. He sat down at his desk. He looked at the viewport, the sun, the planets, the vast and silent void. The Empire was still there. The conquests continued. The certainty remained, but something had changed. A seed had been planted, a question had been asked. And somewhere, in the endless dark, a ship was still watching. Vexarin touched the thermos, the dented steel, the cold tea, the patience. He smiled. It wasn't old, it was patient.